back, Elliot. I hope you and Karen had a great time in Europe.
We did. It was a great time. We went to Denmark, Sweden, and Norway. We were gone for about 16 days, and it was just wonderful. Beautiful part of the world, nice people, and a great trip. Went with some friends and joined a 24-person tour. Great group, and really glad we did it. So looking forward to maybe doing something kind of like that next year. Now that we've tested it and decided we really like it.
Well, now that you're back, I would reference 60 years ago, a song with the title Eve of Destruction had a funny line in there, which basically said, you may leave here for 4 days in space, but when you return, it's the same old place. So now that you're back, more chaos ensues. There's been more activity in our space and many others. And so I guess we'll do our best to identify some of those. And for the rest of you, you can Google Eve of Destruction, written by P.F. Sloan back in 1965, and let us know what you think. So anyway, first thing I want to start off with is the executive order released on August 7th from the White House, one of obviously many executive orders that we've talked about. This particular one is under the title of Guaranteeing Fair Banking for All Americans. This is, as we've mentioned many times, an attempt to address what some call debanking. I still call it de-risking because banks are making a risk-based decision on accounts. This particular executive order is certainly consistent with some of the things we heard, some of the complaints that we heard that several entities believe they were being unfairly targeted in terms of getting financial access or losing account relationships. I think it's much, much more complicated than that. I'll just read a couple of things from the underlying purpose and let the listeners make up their own minds. Some financial institutions participated in government-directed surveillance programs targeting persons participating in activities and causes commonly associated with conservatism and the political right, following the events that occurred at or near the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, 2021. Just a little level set on that. Number of our clients and other institutions were able to identify criminals from January 6th and looked at financial footprints to report suspicious activity so that law enforcement could be prepared for any follow-up activities during the inauguration. Hardly government-directed surveillance. So that's one thing I would just say. In addition to that, the various definitions, take a look at it when you get in there. They repeat the notion of removing reputation risk from the federal banking agency exam oversight, which has been done earlier. There's a series of requirements in here that have to occur roughly within 120 days of this order. And I would just say this, the notion that institutions are going to be challenged for the risk-based decisions they make, we may not see the ramifications right away, but I will bet the farm that we will see them not too far distant, in the far distant future, not in the far distant future, but fairly soon. So here's the situation. Banking agencies want financial institutions to make risk decisions, and that's based on the type of account, the type of activity, type of transactional footprint. This particular executive order, mark it down, folks. It's going to impact all of us in terms of an explosion of white-collar crime. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, one of the interesting phrases that appears again in the purpose statement, as you mentioned, is the idea that decisions in the past have been made on factors other than individualized, objective, risk-based standards. And that phrase caught my eye because I realized it's a string of things, but risk-based standards are rarely truly objective. They are always going to have a subjective component. It's not if organizations, and many do, use some kind of risk scoring model, they are never going to be totally objective because the factors are too complicated and what might be risky behavior by one group of clients or prospective clients may not be risky behavior by others based on the client's expertise in the area, all different kinds of things. So I think that the goal here in using those words as kind of the North Star is flawed. And I agree with you 100%. I think that we are going to see banks urge to step away from making truly active risk decisions. And what that could set us up for is something similar in terms of the impact on the economy of 2008, 9, and 10.
One other thing to close this out, there's a good piece you find on LinkedIn by Jason McCullough. Jason is he puts together the FinTech Business Weekly, and he has a piece in there that talks about this quote debanking issue. And one of the premises is that what has happened was an exaggeration of Operation Choke Point, and he reminds us in this piece that Operation Choke Point was real, but it was hardly the shadowy, coordinated conspiracy many on the right or deep in crypto seem to believe it was. In fact, as Jason points out, the relatively small-scale initiative focused on combating merchants' use of financial institutions and third-party payment processors to defraud customers. So take a look at that as well. So let's switch to something a little more positive. Our good friend Lauren Core with IRS-CI posted a piece on LinkedIn this week on something that I know she's been intimately involved in and always been a strong proponent of private-public partnership, and that's a what's called CI First. And this particular series of programs, this is between IRS-CI and financial institutions, and the CI First and the piece that she has posted is a feedback in response to strategic threats. So she's listed a number of benefits of the program, which obviously enhancing information sharing and that sort of thing. But also there's a series of statistics based on the statistics that IRS-CI puts out once a year on the use of BSA data. But she also lists in here, it's a part of the document, optimizing financial record requests. That's also been something that she definitely talked about a lot when she was in the private sector, and specific issues like rolling subpoena productions and that sort of thing. But there are some metrics in there as well. So again, I think this is excellent. Guy Fico is still IRS-CI chief, and he helps spearhead this program, which again is an excellent example of private-public partnership.
Yes, and this was her posting was prompted in part by the fact that IRS-CI hosted its first CI First executive forum in Washington, where they had executives from the private sector join with executives from the service in discussing how CI First can enhance the public-private partnership process.
I know, Elliot, you raised an issue that's going on in New York, a settlement there. I know you want to talk about.
Yeah, so the Paxos Trust Company agreed to pay a $26.5 million penalty to the state of New York for failure to conduct sufficient due diligence of its former partner Binance and systemic failures in its anti-money laundering program. Paxos also has agreed to invest an additional $22 million to improve its compliance program and remediate deficiencies pursuant to a plan approved by DFS. Paxos is a limited purpose trust company that's chartered in New York, and it's authorized to engage in virtual currency business. It's had that charter since 2015. Both DFS, some other states, and the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency have these limited purpose trust charters. And Paxos actually is in the process of applying for a federal limited purpose trust charter, as are a number of other virtual currency market participants. So we'll see where this leads. Ending up with this kind of a settlement with an existing regulator could have an impact on their current application, unknown at this time. But just an indication that when you're in this space, there's still an expectation by regulators that you're going to actually do what you're responsible for doing in terms of compliance, and particularly in the compliance program space.
I know you also wanted to mention, since we talked extensively this year about the pausing of FCPA, the declination from the Department of Justice on a case involving Liberty Mutual.
Yeah, so I won't do a commercial for Liberty Mutual, although I do find their commercials occasionally bring a smile to my face. Liberty Mutual is going to pay $4.7 million to avoid a criminal bribery charges involving an Indian subsidiary. And this is the first corporate action since the Justice Department unfroze enforcement of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. So you'll recall that initially they said, well, we're really not going to enforce it. Then they took a step back and said, we're going to enforce it at least to a limited extent. And so this is an indication potentially that white collar prosecutors still have some leeway to pursue matters at U.S. Headquartered multinationals. Because again, this was activity in India. This was self-disclosed by Liberty Mutual and then verified by the prosecutors. The bribe size was about $1.5 million through intermediaries to 6 state-owned banks in India. I think it's a good sign that bribery at least isn't, the spigot isn't wide open. I'm disappointed to see that a U.S.-based company, with or without the FCPA being heavily enforced, is still doing this activity. I did not see anything in the reports that indicated where the initiation of the activity occurred. Was it a corporate decision, or was it somebody local who said, I've got work I've got to get done, and this is how I can get it done.
Since on Friday, when this posts, at least as of now, it's still supposed to happen, Trump will be meeting with Putin in Alaska. There is a minority staff report on the Senate side about Russian sanctions in terms of dealing with Ukraine. This was just released by a series of senators from different committees, including Senator Warren, Senator Shaheen. The title of the piece is "Dropping the Baton: How America is Failing to Use Russian Sanctions and Export Controls to Help Achieve a Just Peace in Ukraine." The executive summary touches on a number of things. I'll just call out a couple. One of the findings, according to the authors, so obviously we encourage you to read. It's a 20-page document. The administration has further undermined Ukraine's leverage by repeatedly signaling a lack of commitment in maintaining effective sanctions. The Trump administration, finding 3, has failed to capitalize on an opening to drive down Russian oil revenue. And then across the agencies, again, the authors maintain that the administration decisions have caused concerning strain in staffing to support Russian sanctions and export controls. Take a look at the report. Obviously, sanctions is an important aspect in the AML-CFT field, but also as a national security tool. A lot of debate. There's always been debate about the efficacy of sanctions. So that's an age-old issue. But I think it's important to read everything out there, no matter who's producing the document, and take a look at their analysis. So this is just another one that we would urge people to take a look at.
Yes, certainly reflect. As I read the report, it reminded me of the fact that the current administration has been inconsistent in terms of where it seems to stand in terms of the Russian-Ukrainian situation, and that's a lot of what's called out in the findings.
The report was actually posted on LinkedIn by the FACT Coalition, which we've talked about before, and their initial thought about it was not just to look at the report, but they said the following: we can't leverage sanctions without the ability to enforce them effectively. We need AML tools like the Corporate Transparency Act to follow the money and protect U.S. national security. Another issue that we certainly have talked about from time to time, this conversation and also with the webinars and podcast interviews that we have been involved in.
We spoke a little while ago about Paxos Trust Company, who's involved in the virtual asset and virtual currency space. We also saw this week that Do Kwon, who was the co-founder of Terraform Labs and was indicted back in 2023 on 9 charges related to the collapse of the ecosystem, resulting in an estimated $40 billion in losses. He had originally pled not guilty to the 9 charges. He was in federal court this week and changed his plea from not guilty to guilty on 2 counts of wire fraud and conspiracy to defraud. The plea agreement contemplates a $19 million financial penalty and a potential recommendation by prosecutors of not more than 12 years incarceration. Terraform Labs was a company known for developing the Terra blockchain and its associated cryptocurrencies, Terra USD and Luna. Again, this has been around, as I indicated. The indictment was filed 2 years ago, but finally coming to fruition.
One more item that on my list here I want to mention, and that is that you actually highlighted that the State Department has issued 6 months late its 2024 country reports on human rights practices. So we asked folks to look at that. There was also a piece in the Washington Post analyzing this report, and this was in the August 12th edition of the Washington Report. And basically, the headline is that Rubio recasts long-held beliefs with cuts to U.S. human rights reports. So according to the author, the State Department's assessment covering 198 countries and territories, besides arriving a half year late, had significant cuts from obviously Undersecretary of State Rubio. So I would urge people to read both in conjunction with one another. The report itself, it's always valuable to get these reports with their statistics, but also, again, what some analysts have suggested, that there is a lack of some detail that perhaps would have been useful. Whether that's true or not, I can't say because I haven't been through the entire report, but I just wanted to flag that's out there. We're still waiting for the trafficking in persons report. And as I mentioned on an earlier this week in AML, the fact that they cut that staff from over 20 folks to 4 is going to have an impact on the crafting of that report, which is essential to being proactive in the anti-trafficking space.
Yes, that report normally, or I shouldn't say normally, the last several years has been published by the State Department in June. We're now coming to the middle of August, and we have not seen that report. So certainly staffing is probably an issue on getting that report out, but another very valuable report with a global view relied on by many people as sort of a state of what's happening in a key area. So we'll see if when that comes out, and we'll certainly talk about it. John, and what else you got going on?
Now, that's it on my end. Next week, we will post an interview I did with Bob Simpson, who's a mortgage fraud expert. I'm also, we've also scheduled an interview, and I'll sort of keep you guessing at this point, but a former high-level banking official covering her career, or her thoughts on a number of issues throughout the past couple of decades regarding AML, and what she thinks about issues like the executive order, the change in the Corporate Transparency Act, and other things. So that interview will take place on Monday. So we'll obviously post that in a week or two after that. And I am still trying to connect with a few others. We have our August 28th, we have our August webinar, and that's on the growing fraud threat. Really excited about our 2 panelists, and we're going to cover as much of the waterfront that we can in an hour. Obviously, fraud is exploding, and I would argue will continue to explode even more based on all the things we've talked about. But we will give you both a practical insight and some recommendations going forward on how to improve your systems and improve your policies regarding fraud prevention.
Well, John, it's good to be back. I appreciate you and Joe doing a great job while I was gone, and I will talk to you next week.
Stay safe. Thanks.
You too. Bye-bye.